good day to listeners. We're back again with another podcast of the For the Gambia show with my humble host, Mr. Pastor Seka. And we're delighted today to have a brother, a Gambian, somebody who's, I would call all over. He's all over when it comes to business, when it comes to finance, when it comes to civil rights, you name it. The brother is none other than Nyang Njie, Nyang Njie, but commonly known to many as Nyang Njie, who's a Gambian, of course. And will be talking to us today a lot about the economy, his background, the Gambia, and a whole lot more. Nyang would like to welcome you to the For the Gambia podcast.
Well, thank you for hosting me, and once again, I'm thanking Mr. Seka and your able self, Mr. Thomas, and nice having me.
Thank you. And if you can just tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you hail from? Where you started? Your parental background, and who is Nyang Njie for the people listening?
Wow, that can be a book in itself. But in short, Nyang Njie is from Banjul originally, meaning I was born in Westfield, but I was raised in Fajara, but I still consider myself a Banjulian because my roots strictly from Banjul on both sides of my family. And Lancaster and Perseverance are home to me. Lancaster is my maternal home, and Perseverance, Njie and Jarga is my paternal home. So yes, I'm a thoroughbred Banjulian, and I believe in the ideals of Wabanjul. Not that Wabanjul are better than anybody else, but Banjul at some point was a beacon of hope. And we shared with the little we had with the rest of the country, and we helped raise a lot of people. And that's the Gambia we want to build again. Gambia that's community-oriented, Gambia that's people-oriented, and Gambia that was driven for the greater good of our society.
And can you just briefly touch on your childhood days? I mean, the schools that you've been to. I mean, how was your childhood like? And what led to you coming to the States? And all of those small little details, that are in it.
Well, my childhood has been eventful, and I've been blessed to have a childhood that was accorded to me by my parents and my community at large to be able to grow up as a child, meaning I grew up around loving people, caring people, and community-oriented people who gave me the opportunity to grow just like any other normal child. And I went to Methodist kindergarten for my nursery school. From Methodist kindergarten, I went to Methodist primary. From Methodist primary, I then proceeded to Gambia High School. And whilst at Methodist and Gambia High School, I met quite a lot of friends that are now my lifelong friends because I grew up with them and shared common values with them. And most of them, our parents were friends. So that's just basically in a nutshell my childhood. And in passing, I had few friends that, I spent quite a lot of time with growing up, and they're still around me.
Now, in 1993, you were studying in Jacksonville in the States, right?
Yes.
Okay. What were the challenges there? We are here and those in the West. What would be the best advice you can give to somebody who is just here right now listening to this program and is planning on going to school or already in school and facing so many challenges economically, especially with the financial aspect? What would be your advice, and what were your challenges, and how were you able to overcome those challenges?
Well, my biggest challenge going to school was in financial, because at least I can say thanks to my parents. They really took care of my schooling, so that wasn't a problem. My biggest challenge was not even a cultural problem, but it was a problem of, I wouldn't even call it white supremacy, but having challenges of living in a predominantly white-controlled area. From Gambia, I came to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is in the deep south. That's in Alabama. And I went to a predominantly white school. So one, I was a minority being black, being an international student, and worse off, I was an African. So that really prompted me to be very active in my school. I was a senator on campus, meaning I was part of student government. I was heavily involved in African American Association of the university. And also, I wanted to make sure that the African American students on campus were given their due rights, to the point that the first major sit-in in that university was spearheaded by me and few other African American friends. Wow. And thereon, that's how, multicultural diversity came to that campus. They had an Office of Minority Affairs, and they spent more on the student life budget in making sure that issues of concerns to the African American student population, a bird's eye view of the world that I was exposed to. The world I was exposed to living in the Gambia was that, hey, we're all the same. And right. I went to a place where not everyone was the same, and people were not judged on the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. And this really turned me into the person and molded me into the person I became, because I had to survive, I had to fend for myself, and I had to defend myself. And in defending myself, I also helped defend others who I felt were in a position of disadvantage. And it just became a norm. And for some reason, those days are long gone, but it stuck into my being, and that's just who I am now.
Is there anything in particular that you remember racially that happened to you directly towards you?
Well, there are a lot of things. I call them more of racial stereotypes and racial bias that are institutionalized in the U.S. Like being from Africa, most of my peers, especially my Caucasian peers, were very nosy about what an African is. And to the point people ask me, do you live on trees? I mean, things that were very stupid for me, but, in hindsight, I saw it as, ignorance. It was not only racism, but it was ignorance, because these people were not educated about Africa and
Trust
Africans.
me, it's still going on.
I know, but it's unfortunately that's America for you.
Yeah. Just to buttress that point, I remember when I first came here in the States and I started college right away. One of my my schoolmates, who is an American, asked me, "Whether in Africa do we live on trees and do we chase lions?" So yeah. That is just...
well, see, that's Hollywood. Hollywood has conditioned the American to see us, in the form of Tarzan, to see us in the form of Beauty and the Beast, to see us in the form of Kunta Kinte. Right. And that's the strength of media. Pictures are powerful, and they leave messages, and these messages are ingrained in the mindsets of people, and this mindset becomes their reality. And that's why in TV and in films, we always say that art should not imitate life, but life should imitate art. And this is one thing that has really disturbed the American, if you ask me. The American worldview is very narrow, to the point that everything they do, I mean, you look at NBA, they call themselves world champions, and they haven't played outside of North America, and not only North America, but just Canada and the US. Baseball World Series.
Right.
So it's just a concept of grandiosity that Americans really place themselves, and they don't, the average American don't really understand international geopolitics, let alone international cultures. So if you look at what's happening today with Donald Trump, it's as a consequence of what America is, a closed society that is well informed internally, but ill-informed outside their borders. Americans don't know much about Mexico, their next-door neighbors. They don't even understand much about Canada. And even if you want to move it further, you have Americans in Georgia that don't know nothing about Alabama or South Carolina. And I don't blame them. It's just the way their societies are set up. So basically, they export these things to any other person that they meet outside of their mainstream cultures. And it's unfortunate, but that's the American reality. And it's something that we have to live with until Hollywood changes the script.
Let's hope so. I remember going to school in a very small town called Corsicana, Texas. I once met somebody there.
Quite right.
I once met somebody
there. That's
Navarro College, exactly. Yeah.
So, exactly, yeah.
I once met somebody there who has never even left the town of Corsicana. All their lifetime, they have never even left that town to even go to Dallas. So that just kind of shows, what you were just elaborating on. But just moving forward just a little bit, we saw that, when you were in school, you got your bachelor's degree and your master's degree both in economics. Why economics?
Well, as a child growing up, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My mom has been a renowned businesswoman in the Gambia. I love business, but I didn't like the idea of business as a business. I wanted to be behind what drives business. And I understood later on that business is driven by economics and policy. So my interest has been in economics and policy and to a point law, but I never wanted to pursue law. So economics became something that was ingrained in me, and it was just a natural relationship between me and the subject matter. So I never found it difficult, and I found it easy to relate with because it was something that I thought I was already within what, the economy was all about. So I found it easy, I found it interesting, and above all, it was something that gave me a kick and a stimulus at the same time. So I wanted more, and the more I wanted more, the more I searched for more. And that's what led me to what I did. And basically, I'm still looking for more, and I've never heard enough of it.
Now, can you just kind of touch a little bit on your stint at Harvard University and the IMF Institute? What were you doing there?
Well, I studied economics, and I really wanted to do more work on public finance. And public finance basically is about budgeting, it's about fiscal issues, it's about understanding government accounts. So the IMF was a first port of call that I got to, and basically what I learned from the IMF was fiscal management, financial management, how to run government expenses, how to run government resources, how to balance budgets, how to understand balance of payment, how to understand fiscal issues and monetary issues, how to complement monetary issues as a fiscal authority. So these are things that I've learned from the IMF, and I've also learned how multilateral organizations like the IMF move. And at Harvard University, basically, I did the same. I went there to understand public finance in depth, and I was given the opportunity to be a student of someone who knew Gambia very well. His name is Malcolm McPherson. Malcolm McPherson came to the Gambia through USAID, and he worked at the Ministry of Finance for quite a while as a consultant and a technical assistant, and later he went back to academia. So when I was at the Kennedy School of Government, he was one of the lecturers that lectured me a lot on developmental economics and also public finance. So it was a great stint being there, and I was able to see the world in a very, very unique way, yet still diverse, because I met people from all walks of life. From basically, it was like the UN General Assembly. I met people from all corners of the world, and we discussed and elaborated on issues of concerns, especially on public finance issues and public policy issues, with students and academic practitioners from all over the world. So that's what I really learned at Harvard University.
And then right after that, you decided to go back home. I mean, it's not something that everybody does around here. We all went to school here, but we all decided to stay, to pursue some of the opportunities over here, but for you, you decided that you wanted to go back home, and back home you did. Why?
Well, I think my reason for coming home is very simple and easy. I had no reason to come home if I was looking at family ties. My immediate family, meaning mom, dad, brothers, they all live in the U.S. So when I came home, I was alone in terms of just being home without my nuclear family, meaning my immediate siblings and parents. But nonetheless, to me, Gambia was greater than that. And my vision has always been, even before heading to the U.S., that I was going to go to the U.S. for school. And after I finished school, I was coming home. And that has always been my premise, and that has always been my prayer. So I just fulfilled something that was dear to me. And I believed in country. I believed in duty to country. I believe that Gambia will be a better place, when Gambians get up and build Gambia. So I cannot expect Gambia to be better if I am not willing to give my quota. Some people do believe that they can give their quota from afar. which I don't have a problem with. Each to his own. But my belief was I have to be close to the action to be relevant. I have to be close to the action to make meaningful impact. And thank God I've been around since 2000, and I'm not complaining.
Thank you so much. Mr. Njie, if you can talk to us about your stint between 2000 and 2003 while working at the Ministry of Finance in the Gambia as a senior microeconomist. What roles were you playing mostly, and what would you consider your biggest achievement between 2001 to 2003 while working at that ministry?
Well, whilst at the Ministry of Finance, I was a macroeconomist, and the good thing is I was at the Economic Management Planning Unit. Basically, that's the nerve center of the Ministry of Finance then, and we were looking at the macroeconomy as a whole. I was fortunate to be able to sit at the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank, thereby representing the fiscal authorities at the Monetary Board, which is the central bank. I was also able to be attending high-level economic committee meeting with the executive at the State House. And also I was able to collaborate and work with donors like the UN, the World Bank, the ADB, the IDB, the IMF on issues of policy concerns to government. So I was given an exposure to work at a bird's eye view, looking at the overall macroeconomy, because the unit I worked with, the Economic Management Planning Unit, was basically the unit that was spearheading economic management, economic growth, and economic outlook.
And what would you consider your biggest achievement in those days? What you are proud of today that you look back and said, well, at least when I was there in 2001 to 3, this is what I contributed in doing.
Well, I think if I look back today, one thing that really made me proud is that, yes, Gambia was going through turmoil, and at least we were able to institute what you call a cash budget. A cash budget was government will not spend what it didn't generate. So there was zero deficit financing. We were not borrowing. And basically, we were doing our budget on a month-to-month basis, whereby the sectors will come with their expenditure requirements, and government will look at our revenue inlays where we are getting monies for the coming 30 days. And basically, we were apportioning resources to every sector based on what was coming. And that, to me, was fiscal discipline, considering the dire straits that Gambia found itself. And if that was continued today, we wouldn't have the bloated domestic debt stock that we had. And sometimes desperate times calls for desperate measures. And a cash budget is not the most efficient way of budgeting, but in a situation that Gambia found itself then, that was the most ideal thing to do. And it really showed the sectors that, hey, this country is struggling and it needs to survive, but we all need to do a sacrifice. So a lot of things were deferred, a lot of expenditures were suspended, and we basically met the bare minimum and made sure that government service delivery was up to the time, and also that government functionaries, meaning employees of government, were paid on time. So we did this, and we ended up having a committee called NEFCOM, National Expenditure Finance Committee. And basically what this committee did was to look at the overall economy and apportion who to spend what and when to spend it, and they had to bring in their requirements on a monthly basis.
In those settings at the Ministry of Finance, was there any time that you were there in a sitting with the president where policies were discussed and there was a disagreement where you feel like, okay, the president agreed to this, but I don't agree? Was there ever any situation like that?
Well, I had several opportunities to work closely. Like I said, I used to attend high-level economic committee meetings periodically, and most of the time it was chaired by the vice president. And I think there was one occasion that the president attended our meetings, and we were free to talk. And I think around 2003, Jammeh was still, I won't say a rookie, but he was still not the despot that we ended up knowing in his latter days. But he listened, and I think he didn't have a problem listening to people with divergent views, especially if these views were genuine. So during those days, I think he didn't know much, or he wasn't too consumed with power. So he was a bit tolerant, and we were able to have exchanges that were not only amicable, but I think reasonable.
I have a quick question about petroleum pricing that I want you to touch in. But you made a point that is very interesting, and most people have said this. We previously just recently had an interview with a former Minister of Youth and Sports, Ms. Amina Fall Sonko, and I asked her a similar question. What did you think was the reason why Jammeh changed? You said between 2003 he wasn't the despot that he became. What changed in your view?
Gambians change.
How?
Jammeh didn't change. We created a monster. How did we create a monster? We made Jammeh what he, became. How?
Mm-hmm.
Gambians compromised their integrity. Gambians became very opportunistic, and Gambians didn't believe in themselves anymore. And basically, we really leveraged our lives to one person, and we all lived under the whims and caprices of this one person. And this one person ended up having a bloated ego, whereby our elders, our imams, everyone in this society that's relevant and somebody just went ahead with Jammeh's scripted plan rather than telling him, hey, this is not right. We can do it this way or we can do it that way. So basically, the monster that we ended up having is accumulation. He really became a monster over time. And it was the Gambians who really nurtured, this beast and allowed him to grow. And that's what we just saw in Gambia this past 8-9 years is a culmination of what we made him to be.
Now, were you fired or you resigned?
Actually, I didn't resign. My services were terminated because at some point, I think he believed I was in Gambia not because I want to work, but there were powers that brought me to Gambia because, like I said, most of my work was externally related. Mm-hmm. And I ended up going to the NIA, and I was arrested for at least a good 4 or 5 days. Mm-hmm. And initially, I was charged for spying. And it was a ridiculous charge because I cannot spy for the IMF or the World Bank because these are development partners that do work with the Gambia, and they had a program, meaning they share fiscal and monetary data. You cannot give data to someone who already has access to your data. Mm-hmm. But I think that was the paranoia that was building from this guy that we know as President Jammeh. So yes, I had a story to tell like many people who worked in government. But yes, I could have gone back after they realized it wasn't so. But naturally, I don't give people an opportunity to give me a second time. So once bitten, twice shy. So that was the end of me. But I still worked with them, in an auxiliary manner because I did some consulting work whereby the government was the beneficiary, but I never directly worked back with the government.
Okay, my final question for this segment before my co-host comes in is on our petroleum. We go home every now and then, and one thing I realize with our petroleum compared to here, you've lived in the States before, is most people even pick on us, and let me say that in Wolof, and saying that suñ essence bi dañ ko dee njar ak ndox, and I don't get it. You buy a full tank and you go to Birkama and come back, your tank is almost empty. Now I want you to touch on that if you have any knowledge of that, and what is the reason, and how do you guys go by with the petroleum pricing? Who determines that, and how does it affect or help the economy?
Well, when I was at the ministry, I was responsible for petroleum exports. And with petroleum exports, there was a time government used to import petroleum on behalf of the OMCs, and we will, further sell it to the OMCs. In Gambia, there is no way you can play with the petroleum product, mm-hmm. because when we import petroleum, we have to do a quality test at the port when the vessel arrives. And we have companies like SGS, they do a certification. They will take samples from different compartments in the ship, test it, and make sure that the specification that was ordered is the specification that was delivered. Then the product will be pumped through the pipelines from the port to the tanks at Halfdai, now Mandinari. Wow. And once they're stored there, periodically they will do tests to make sure that the product hasn't degraded whilst in the tank. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a problem. The problem in Gambia is petroleum products are expensive. Mm-hmm. The reason why they're expensive is government hasn't found an efficient way of importing or government has given contracts to people that are putting a fat on top of the product, thereby feeding others. Because generally petroleum products are priced at Platts, and in Gambia we use Platts FOB Mediterranean because that's the closest points of call that we buy our product. So our Platts are the quotations from Mediterranean refineries. Then we have on top of it what you call a premium. A premium is what the supplier adds on top of the Platts. So the Platts is the indicative price per metric ton of refined product, be it AGO, which is diesel, be it PMS, which is petrol. And petrol has different grades from RON, that's RON 85, all the way to RON 97. And most of the time, we don't buy RON 97. That's high octane. I mean, it's the best for the engines of the cars, but it's not very affordable. So we buy, on average, anywhere between RON 93 and RON 87. That's the specs that we normally buy. And we also buy Jet A1, that's for aviation. But see, the way the prices work, once the product comes in, there's duty element and everything, then we have a pump price. The pump price is per liter, and that's why people believe Gambian petrol is expensive. That's why people believe petroleum in Gambia is expensive, because it's not sold by the gallon, it's sold by the liter. Yes, so that's one problem that Gambia faced in terms of petroleum products. And the pricing, like I said, it is not efficient, but it can be better managed if we do the right thing. So going forward, I think there are lessons learned, and this government can learn a few things to make sure that petroleum pricing is done better, because it's a strategic product that runs across all sectors of the economy, from transportation to exports to import to electricity to the tourism. So it's a sensitive product that needs proper pricing to make sure that the economy is not overheated by inflation, nor is it retarded for slow growth, because high petroleum prices will lead to slow growth. High petroleum prices will also fuel inflation in a way. So we want these things to be a thing of the past, and this government can learn a thing or two from the past.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's a good explanation right there about the petroleum issues that we have. But just moving on, we've seen what happened last month. Not even last month. It was just about 2 weeks ago, right? The
Yes.
Independence Day and the inauguration. I mean, I know you were right in the middle of it. You know, what can you tell us about it?
I think it was a great day for Gambians. And to me, Independence 1965 was a great day. But this independence was greater than 1965. I wasn't around, because the reason why I said that, 1965 literally was handed on a silver platter to Gambians. Yes, we agitated for independence, but we didn't suffer. What we suffered under Jammeh, we didn't suffer under colonial rule, to be honest. And even, the times before colonial rule, what we suffered with Jammeh, we didn't suffer. So Independence 1965 was euphoric, but Independence Day 2017 was historic, because we got ourselves from the clutches of tyranny that was worse than what the colonials dished out to us. So I always tell people December 1st, 2016 was Emancipation Day for Gambia, if you ask me. Emancipation meaning we freed ourselves from tyranny. And that tyranny was worse than what colonialism had to offer to Gambians. So this independence was momentous. This independence was historic. And this independence will be something that will be remembered, for the longest of time, because I don't think we will never, ever, ever in our lives have a despot like Jammeh. And Gambians will say never again in our history will we allow such a non-entity, a vile human being who doesn't deserve our recognition, our respect, to treat us in the manner he treated Gambia and Gambians for the longest of time, by looting our resources, by plundering our commonwealth, and by also dehumanizing the Gambian to a point that we didn't deserve.
Oh, great. You mentioned December 1st, which is a historic day in the history of the Gambia. Do you think Do you think we should be celebrating December 1st in any kind of way?
Well, I believe December 1st should be a day in our Republican calendar. Why? It's not about the politics of the election, but it's about the significance of getting rid of one of Africa's worst tyrants and one of Gambia's most shameful sons. We really, really, really fought hard for this. And the reason why I said we fought hard for it, Gambians from all walks of life came together and said, enough. And you know what? We made our voices heard. And we also made sure that, we have had enough of Jammeh. And that's why he became a relic and, a past in our history.
Now, talking about voices being heard, your voice was heard a lot. And there's a rumor out there that your life was in danger at some point. That's what led to you fleeing to Senegal. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a fact. I've been writing, I've been commenting for at least a good 5-6 years. And I've been very vocal this past 3 years about what's happening. And I won't say that I was a lone voice. There were others on the ground who did similar things. But I believe my pen was my weapon, and I know how to talk using my pen or my keypad. So I did an effective job talking to Gambians and explaining to Gambians what we need to do in the best manner that I know how to communicate. But of recent, especially sometime in December, I had to first go into hiding in Gambia, but it got to a point that wasn't sustainable, so I had to flee. And that was the best way to preserve myself, because the foundations of being a human being is to self-preserve. And I would have been stupid and foolish to say that for my pride, I'll stay and face this despot, because this despot, like I said, has no bounds, and he cared less whether I'm alive or dead. But I think me being alive meant a lot to Gambia than me being dead, so I had to preserve my sanctity as a human being.
Going to Senegal led to you being on TFM in the program called Jakarlo, where most people had the opportunity to know who you were, see you on TV, and just hear what you had to say. I mean, for me, that was my first time even knowing who you were. And I'm sure a lot of people out there too. What can you tell us about that experience at TFM?
Well, whilst I was in Senegal, I did several shows before Jakarlo. I didn't solicit Jakarlo. I didn't go looking for Jakarlo. I was in my apartment in Dakar around midnight sleeping. Someone called me and said, "Hey, my name is X. I got your number from few people, and I'm a media guy who works with Halifa Saleh. And your name came up that we would like you to attend this show on his behalf. Can you?" I said, "Why not? I can." So that's how my opportunity to go to Jakarlo happened, and the rest is history, or was history.
During the program, we heard Metro Alagie Jaw called, and most Gambians know who he is now. He was a Jammeh fan in some way, and you were there. What can you tell us about that call? I mean,
Well, for one, Alagie Jaw is not a Jammeh fan. Alagie Jaw is a merchant of fortune who's out to make money on someone else's misery. I mean, he has already done that to Hissène Habré, and he thought Jammeh was vulnerable, and he was going to make another client out of Jammeh. So basically, he wanted to be Jammeh's mouthpiece, and he did a bad job trying to be Jammeh's mouthpiece. So basically, what I had to do was to stop him on his tracks. That, hey, we understand your game and we understand the score, but Gambians are too sophisticated to allow you to play such a game. But that notwithstanding, I will not waste my time talking to a non-entity like you, because we've already figured you out, and we won't give you credence or relevance to be someone that you are not, because he's a non-entity. And that's why I told him in Wolof, Wahi Geja Sahako Tontu, because someone irrelevant as Alagie Jaw doesn't deserve our time to talk. So we will leave him with the smallest of creatures that can do destructive harm to him, and that's called shame. So basically, we will let shame deal with Alagie Jaw.
You're listening to the For the Gambia show, and our guest today is none other than Nyang Njie, Nyang Omar Njie, but known to many as Nyang Njie. Nyang, you have a vast knowledge and experience when it comes to financing. I want you to touch on something that is right now affecting the Gambia, and that is our debt, our national debt. And how do we get out of this? Just recently, the disclosures that was made by the finance department, the huge withdrawals that were taken out, not through checks or anything, but cash withdrawals. It's too much, and it's mind-boggling. But as a financial person who knows a lot about the financial sector, how do we get out of this, and how would we avoid such?
Well, it's all about lifestyle. Governments are like entities. They're like human beings. They have an expenditure pattern and they have an income pattern. So our lifestyle should commensurate with our incomes. And Gambia has been living beyond its means since 94. And that's why we had a bloated bureaucracy where government hired more people than government can pay. Government, spending more than it could afford. But see, the problem is we had weak governance structures and we had strong men. And these strong men really, just went on with their appetite. Their appetite, one person like Jammeh had three appetites. One was to shave off monies from the government for his personal use. Two, he had a political agenda that he wanted to fulfill. And his political agenda was to build schools all over the place. So most of the schools that Jammeh built were schools that he built on grants and aid from our multilateral and bilateral partners. But one thing we forgot was that these schools, once built and handed over to the government, we had to worry about the payroll. And this is how government got bloated overnight. Because in 1994, we didn't have that many schools. And a lot of people who will today argue, Jammeh built so many schools and hospitals. What they fail to realize is the burden put on the state by these excess schools that we built. So you see, in development, one, it has to be incremental. Two, it has to be sustainable. But the reason why we had a big domestic debt is the lifestyle that Gambia chose. Now is the time to change this lifestyle. And for it to change, the government needs to sensitize the population that, hey, we're not a rich country, we are not a poor country. We all need to sacrifice for A, B, C, and D to happen. And for this to happen, we need to do this, this, and this. So I will advise Gambians to make sure that we force our governments to at least help us in helping grow this country of ours. And the best way we can help it is for us to do the collective sacrifice of at least helping this government to reduce expenditures. And once we reduce expenditures, we need to put these funds into paying off our debt. When I say paying off our debt, reducing the debt stock. And I think this has to be an initiative, if you ask me. The first thing that I really will love to see as a Gambian is for the government to create an initiative. This initiative is just a token. And the token is a commitment that every Gambian puts in $1 to $10 as a donation towards bringing down the debt. The only reason we're doing that is not because we want to make money out of it. We want to make sure that we sensitize the population about our debt problems. We sensitize the population about the issue of this debt, what it has to do relative to our economy. And once we do this, I think the general population will understand that we have a problem. If they know we have a problem, they will be willing to assist government in solving this problem, meaning their expectations will not be as high relative to someone who doesn't understand. So, yes, our debt issue has to be a paramount issue in terms of government's communication strategy with its citizens and make sure that the citizens are committed towards bringing the debt down. And once this is done, we need to find strong legislation in terms of having laws that will put up a debt ceiling. This debt ceiling will make sure that government cannot go back to Parliament and ask for supplementary budgets. That means, let's say government says our budget for 2018 is $100 million, and come May of 2018, they go back for another $70 million because that's not what the law says. So once we have strong laws to make sure that we can have legislation to make sure that we cannot exceed certain amount in terms of deficit financing, it will help reduce our borrowing. And this borrowing has really put Gambia in a mess because today the reason why we have high interest rates in Gambia is because the central bank is competing the traditional banks for depositor monies. If I deposit my money at the commercial bank today, they'll give me maybe about 13%. If I deposit my monies with the central bank in the form of T-bills, they give me 18 to 19%. So basically, what this has done has crowded out the commercial banks who would have been in the best position to borrow money for investments, and now people are borrowing the central government. And unfortunately, when government borrows money, most of it, they use it for recurrent expenditure. That means paying of rents, travel, buying diesel for their cars, maintenance, and these things don't yield any economic dividend. So we are spending money on thin air, and it's mounting exponentially month in, month out. So it's a problem that we need to contain.
All right. I want to touch on one thing quickly. You made mention of the competition with the banks. We've seen the emergence of so many banks in the Gambia. I could remember before you can count the banks on the palm of one hand.
Yeah.
But now you've seen so many banks. It's like every time I go to Gambia on a holiday or to visit, you cannot even count the number of banks that are there. You know a lot about financing. Is this good for the economy? How does it affect it? Or it is something that is not good for the economy?
And before you come in, Mr. Njie, before you come in, do we have enough capital that is circulating around the country that warrants all these banks to be there?
First and foremost, I'm a student of free enterprise. I believe that every business has a right to live and a right to die.
Right.
And it's up to the banks to see whether there's economic sense for their existence in Gambia. And basically, the central bank should legislate, sanitize, and regulate the environment so that these banks will play by the rules set by our monetary authority, which is in this case the governor of the central bank and his team. And I don't have a problem with the proliferation of banks in the Gambia, no problem. The problem I do have is very simple. You cannot have banks in the Gambia and they're not doing banking functions. What are banking functions? Banks are traditionally places to store wealth, create lending, and spur growth. But of late, we have seen our banks turned into what I consider glorified Forex bureaus. What's the glorified Forex bureaus? Basically, they're buying and selling foreign exchange and making money on commissions and fees being charged. And for me, that's not banking. Traditional banking should be an institution that mobilizes resources through deposits and also lend them again and make a spread or a margin on top of that lending. But that hasn't been happening much, and it's because of the way the economy has structured. The banks are parking their deposits to the central bank because the central bank is giving them risk-free investments. I mean, I know of one or two big banks in Gambia, or at least one bank in the Gambia. They have really put on a freeze on lending for many years now, and they still hold a stock of T-bills. So I think that's a moral hazard when the central bank is encouraging banks to buy T-bills instead of borrowing to the general public. Yes, there are issues with borrowing to the general public. One is we have weak legislation in terms of people being able or institutions being able to recover funds from the general public because our legal system needs, a commercial court first needs to be instituted in Gambia so that, loan recoveries will be made easier. And also we need our land management system to make sure that the people who are giving title deeds and things like this to the banks have proper title deeds that are in good faith so that once the banks take them out there, they are in a position to liquidate those assets. But fundamentally, I think these are all monetary management issues and fiscal management issues. And we have had serious fiscal dominance, meaning the fiscal side, Ministry of Finance, has had a significant dominance on our overall economy in the past.
Now, we were talking about reducing the debt, not too long ago. We've seen what happened in Europe with the austerity. Do you think we can have something like that in the Gambia in terms of raising taxes and cutting government spending in order to reduce our national debt?
Raising taxes is not a solution. I mean, you cannot slash and burn. Basically, Gambia is an economy that survives on taxation, and that alone is bad because what it does, it makes our economy not to grow. Because for a company to reinvest, they need savings. But if the tax rates are high, our savings rates goes down. So what Gambia really needs is to lower the tax rates and broaden the tax base. We have a lot of people that are today doing business in the informal sector. Government don't know these businesses. Government don't capture statistics from these businesses. These businesses don't pay taxes because the tax rates are relatively high, so they rather operate in the periphery of the normal economy by just going underground. So today, if the rates are lowered, the tax base will be wider. If the tax base is wider, government will collect volumes of dollars relative to just collecting from, let's say, 7 to 15,000 taxpayers. They'll now collect from 21 to 36,000 taxpayers, but of a lower rate. So my suggestion, my advice to government is to rationalize, streamline our tax administration process and procedures, and at the same time, find a way to grow the economy without taxes. The best way to grow the economy is through inducement. Yes, we don't have monies to give out for stimulus, but the best stimulus government can have is to reduce petroleum prices at the pump, is to reduce cost of electricity, because these are factors of production that's affecting economic growth. If you look at businesses like hotels, restaurants, and the light manufacturers that we have in Gambia.
All right, Mr. Njie, I want you to touch on something that also I don't know if you currently still work with Comium, do you?
No.
Okay.
I'm no longer with Comium.
Either. Okay. If you can just elaborate a little bit about how does this call-in works, because our call-in tariff is very expensive, especially when it comes to mobile phones. When you're home, you buy credit for, let's say, $500. For 2 hours, you make one call, and it's gone. How can that be averted, and what are the causes of that high tariff in call-in rates?
Well, you see, every country needs what you call an ICT policy, information communication technology policy. And we need to ask ourselves, what do we want to achieve as a country? Do we really want to achieve a broader connectivity, or we want to milk an existing infrastructure or technology? If our answer is we want to milk an existing infrastructure or technology, then we're going for money. If we really want to broaden ICT capacities, we do friendly policies that will make sure that ICT thrives. And once ICT thrives, I think the economy opens up. And to me, that's what Gambia should have done. But Gambia has opted to milk this particular platform. And we do happen to have what you call a gateway. On this gateway, we have a country index. Our country index is plus 220. So any call coming to plus 220 legally should go through this gateway. Now, this gateway commands a price. Let's say Senegal today is charging about 11 cents a minute to call, but Gambia is charging 60 cents inbound to destination Gambia. So that 60 cents is so high, and most calling cards that you buy, or most phone companies, they do what you call basket pricing. They will take 6, 7, or 9 countries, put them in a zone, and charge a fixed tariff, even though internally they're buying these destinations at different prices. But the weighted average in the basket will make sure that they'll make a margin on all of them. Wow. And all of a sudden, you have a country like Gambia, where Sierra Leone is charging 18 cents, Senegal is charging 14, Guinea is charging 17, Mali is charging 20, and you have Gambia charging 60.
Wow.
So it means every call that comes to Gambia, it's on your margins from the other countries. So most of these telcos are not too happy getting Gambian calls through their networks. That's one. So that's why you find it difficult sometimes accessing Gambia. It's not that our networks are bad, but our price is so prohibitive, a call to Gambia will eat off the profitability of that particular zone. So these companies, it's just a matter of switching. You can just, put a system that for every 1,000 attempted calls to 220, accept 200. So the 800 calls will fail. That's just a way of discouraging. Then the next thing that was to happen is that people will now see that, hey, it's a good business to call Gambia illegally. So they will open what you call a SIM box. A SIM box is an illegal gateway. Gambia will never see the money, but a pirate sitting somewhere will open a box. talk to a carrier like MCI, Sprint, you name it, British Telecom, France Telecom, and they will buy traffic, pump it through this system, and they will send a bill to these companies at the end of the month and collect it. And Gambia is losing it. So that's what has happened with Gambia having a high tariff. So going forward, I think the solution is for the government of the Gambia to allow all the telecom operators to get their own gateways and manage international tariffs for themselves. So if a company wants to sell US for 5 cents, they can. If a company wants to sell US for 18 cents, they can. Then the subscriber will see where to buy credit from and who to do business with. Then it becomes a functional market. And once that is done, the government needs to set up another gateway that will monitor all these local gateways in the country, whereby all traffic from these gateways, before it goes to the outside world, come through this controlled gateway by the government. And government will have a better way of doing quality and revenue assurance, and no one can cheat government. And to the point, government will not only look at the revenue streams coming out of international calls, but they'll be looking at revenue streams coming out of local call, because airtime, buying top-up, is also another business. But if the taxman is going to a telco to say, you owe us X, the taxman is at the mercy of the telco, because he doesn't know, or he doesn't have a verifiable proof as per what the telco does, because it's the telco who's generating these reports. I have sold so much scratch cards. But if government is to build another layer of another gateway, whereby when you buy a scratch card as a subscriber, it's activated onto your phone, immediately government gets data stored into that gateway, then government have a verifiable proof of what you have done, rather than you telling government what you have done. So there are things that government can do to enhance revenue collection, and also make sure that the leakages that are inbuilt in our system as is will be eradicated.
I hope somebody is listening, but I just wanted to touch on one thing that we used to have in the Gambia, and it's called price control. Do you think Gambia can go back to that at this current situation that we're facing right now with our national debt?
Price control is a bad thing to do, and like I said, I'm a free market guy. I'm a thoroughbred capitalist, and I'm very unapologetic about it. And price control breeds inefficiency via corruption and via colluding. So we don't need to have price controls. What we need to do is to have an open market whereby any importer can bring their product, so long as it's a product of good quality, consumable by Gambians, and charge their price. Then the people who are buying these products will see who they want to buy the product from, because we need to encourage competition. The moment we breed price controls, we're creating inefficiencies. And if we create inefficiency, it's the customers and consumers who suffer. So price control is a thing of the past, and that's for old economists. And any buoyant, vibrant economy going forward will not venture into price control. I think what government needs to do more is consumer protection, making sure that some of these companies like NAWEC, they deliver good services to their subscribers and clients. They make sure that these phone companies deliver quality internet services to their subscribers, quality voice calls, and they make sure that the downtime on their networks are reduced significantly, and also to make sure that the quality of calls, let's say the average call drop rate should not be more than 2%. Like, let's say for every 1,000 calls made, only 2 should fail. And these are the things that government needs to monitor so that people get value for money. Today, we're paying high tariffs to NAWEC, and we're not getting good electricity. We are paying high water tariffs, and we're having poor water pressure. And these are things that government needs to push. So consumer protection is more important to me than price control, because we are paying for something that we're not getting value in return. And I think that's where government needs to intervene in terms of protecting its esteemed citizens who are consumers of these different utility companies.
Now, Mr. Njie, we know that consumer confidence is something that is very, very important to for an economy to get back on its feet. What are some of the measures that the government can take in order for the consumers to have confidence in this government so that they can start spending again, that can lead to economic growth?
See, confidence is the currency traded in economics. And confidence breeds visibility. Without visibility, people don't plan. Without planning, they don't spend. And basically, the Gambian economy suffered because there was no visibility. Tomorrow you can wake up and Jammeh changes a whole lot of things. So that has to change. And once that change, we can have a Gambia whereby people are not afraid of expenditures. So going forward, I think the first and foremost that I think, this is me personally thinking, this particular government needs to do one thing, build confidence again. The best way to build confidence is to have stable exchange rates, because fundamentally Gambia uses Forex more than dollars for our transactions, because 80% of what we buy are from third countries or outside countries. So we need CFA, euro, dollar, pound, whatever it is to do transactions. But fundamentally, what we need most is a stable exchange regime, because Gambia already have a flexible Forex rate. But this flexible Forex rate or Forex exchange regime has been negated by Jammeh intervening in the market as and when he want, and even instituting pricing. And you were talking about price control. And this is a very good example of price control. Whenever Jammeh comes to the market and say, dollar should be sold at 33 or don't sell it, he creates a deeper black market. When he creates a deeper black market, people will buy dollar at 39, 41 because they need the dollar, but they will not openly buy it. So it breeds speculation, similar with price control mechanisms. So this government, back to your point, needs to do things that will spur growth. And I think the first thing is building confidence. Secondly, looking back into tax administration. I think in the Gambia, our tax administration needs work, because the cost of collecting $1 should not exceed 5 bututs. But today, our tax collection, our tax administration relative to tax collected, I believe is very inefficient. And these are things we need to work on to make sure that business confidence is regained. And once business confidence is regained, I think the economy will start getting on its feet. But it's going to be 3 things. Petroleum, because it's a major and strategic input. Taxation, interest rates, and Forex. These are 4 issues that government needs to at least do something in the immediate term to make sure that this economy gets off and at least grease the wheels of this economy to move.
Now, I'm still talking about taxes. I have one of your articles over here on your blog, which is nyangjie.blogspot.com. Anybody who is interested can go look at it. This one is called "The National Debt Can Be an Inhibitor to Growth and Prosperity." And you stated over there that the current Gambian Revenue Authority model needs an overhaul, as a police cannot police itself, and that this is a clear conflict of interest, as enforcers can be administrators of the very function they need to enforce. What do you mean by that?
Well, everyone has their point of view, and my point of view is premised on economic logic. The National Revenue Authority is made up of 2 components: inland revenue, which is income tax, and customs and excise. So someone heading this department should not be from the inland revenue, which is income tax, nor customs. Why? The police cannot police themselves. A custom officer cannot set tariffs for the very institution that he is supposed to enforce on behalf of. So I believe, and this is a fervent belief that I have, that the national authority needs to be remodeled, whereby it has an apex authority. This apex authority will have business managers, it will have economic intelligence officers, it will have economists, accountants, and these people will look at, in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance, the resource envelope of the government and see what kind of taxes can be collected. And they will in turn give targets to both the customs and income tax. And those people will go and enforce and make sure that these targets are met. But the people who are meeting these targets today are the enforcers of the very targets they're meeting. So for me, that is just a cozy, clear conflict of interest that should not happen. But that's for me, and I don't think many will share that, but that's how I see it. But back to that particular blog you just mentioned, when I said the debt can be an inhibitor to our economic growth and prosperity, it means if we have a budget and our debt to GDP ratio is, let's say, 34%, it means for every $1 we collect as taxes, 34 bututs is going towards paying debt. What that means is it's an opportunity cost for us to spend money on hospitals, for us to spend money on schools, infrastructure, and social programs. So that's why we need to tame the domestic debt. That's why we need to reduce the domestic debt. And that's why we need to curb the appetite of the government to be spending money. And the best way to do it is to put a legislative measure that will stop them from eating more than they should be eating.
Now, we all know that the backbone of economic development in all economies is the middle class. Do we have a middle class in the Gambia that can make that happen?
Well, we don't have a middle class anymore. We used to have a middle class. I always tell people that Gambia is a zone of indifference whereby people are either very poor or all right. I won't say rich, but all right. So what has happened, as bad as the Jawara government was to some, I think there was an emergence of middle class. And especially if people are from Banjul, you will attest to this, that people moved from familial compounds to personal properties, and there were developments, and at least we were creating an emergence of a middle class. Some people will say Gambia was elitist then, but I believe it was incremental and it was at a pace that was sustainable. So the first thing Jammeh did was to scrap that whole social agenda and created a social agenda that has really, put away the middle class. So this government needs to, once again, revive economic opportunities so that we can have a thriving middle class, because it's the middle class that grows the economy, it's the middle class that sustains the economy, and it's the middle class that drives the economy.
We're talking to Mr. Nyang Njie or Nyang Njie, who's a Gambian, and you listen to the For the Gambia podcast with Thomas and Pastor Seka. Mr. Njie, what I want you to touch on now is about our internet. How can there be more improvement about our internet to go at least to 4G, and why is the slow development when it comes to our internet services compared to our even neighbor in Senegal? Because their Wi-Fi is way better than us. What is the problem and what is the way forward?
Well, first and foremost, we have the bandwidth. We have what it takes to fly at super speeds. That's not a problem. The problem is the companies that are selling data, they're not NGOs, they're private companies. They have invested significantly in the ACE cable, and most of the promises that were given to them for this investment never fulfilled. And one of those promises where they will run independent gateways. So now for the internet to be effective, fast, and good, they need to invest in what you call the last mile. The last mile in telecom means from the data gateway through the fiber lines to a particular service provider, let's say Economium or an Africell. Mm-hmm. So now the subscribers are picking their data signals from Africell or Economium to their devices or their homes. So that's the last mile. The last mile needs a little bit more infrastructural investments. But why should a company invest in infrastructure when they're already making a negative equity or negative return on their investment? So now this is where the government comes. Data packaging in Gambia is quite expensive, and people are not getting value for money. But yes, these companies need to recoup their investment. So government needs to rationalize the ICT policies nationally. Government needs to rationalize the tax framework, because today, if a company wants to invest in the last mile and they order $4 million worth of equipment to invest into it, they're still paying custom duties on this equipment that's coming. So it's a disincentive for companies to further invest CAPEX, capital expenditure, on things that will really make the internet better, because they are punitive public policies. And these punitive public policies are in the forms of custom duties and things like that. So government needs to really have a framework that will factor in reinvestment into sectors that are critical, like agriculture, tourism, and ICT businesses, to make sure that the investments they're making into the economy are zero rated, because you cannot ask for high-speed internet if the companies know that if they bring $4 million worth of equipment, they will pay custom duties on those equipment.
Thanks for clarifying that, and I hope somebody is listening. Now, let me shift gear to somewhere where you've worked and know more better than I do, or most of us listening, and that is the petroleum sector. Now, in recent years, we heard that the Canadians were even supposed to come and see if we have oil or petroleum. What is the deal with that? Do we have oil or petroleum in the Gambia that was discovered?
Well, in the petroleum business, we have what you call upstream business and downstream business. Upstream is exploration and prospecting. Downstream is retailing of petroleum product. I've been involved significantly on the retail of petroleum product. And I know that in the mid-80s to late 80s and early 90s, there are companies that came to Gambia to do what you call seismic surveys. Mm-hmm. That's to look at Gambia both onshore and offshore to see our oil deposits. Having oil has never been Gambia's problem. Having commercially viable quantities have been the issue. And the only way we can ascertain that is through a company coming in to do test drills through prospecting. And I know that we have about 7 to 8 blocks. They're called the Alhamdulillah blocks. Mm-hmm. And at some point, these blocks were ox enough to would-be prospectors, but the downside is we don't know. The public didn't know. So one thing that we will really push this government to do is to create a Freedom of Information Act where public information is available, because this is public information. We want to know. We want to know how much these companies paid. Mm-hmm. We want to know the tenure that they're given. We want to know where they're given, what kind of consent packages are given to them. These are things that Gambians want to know, and we're not doing it out of curiosity. We're doing it out of our own economic interest. We are the owners of these resources, and the politicians and the executive are managing these resources on behalf of the greater good, and the greater good needs to know at all times what's been done on their name. They are nothing but our proxies, and our proxies should always inform us adequately and in a timely manner, and we want to be informed. And the best way to do that is to have a legislation that will guarantee freedom of information so that we will know the public information that's happening. But back to your point, it will be very difficult to know the status of our offshore arrangements because they were not made public. And the sad thing is we've never seen these license fees that were paid featured in our budgets. So we don't know where the funds were going. We don't know who paid what and to where and when, because we were all left in the dark. So I can't say much about something that I don't know about.
Well, I'm glad you've made some clarity on that. But I think you mentioned something very important, that we need to sensitize the public more about this. But I would just like to end this before my co-host comes in with that. I believe you, Mr. Njie, can help a lot in sensitizing. This interview that we're doing, I don't think will even do justice to your broad-based knowledge when it comes to the things that we've talked about. You have a lot of knowledge, and I'm proud as a Gambian to learn from you, and I'm proud as a Gambian to have the pleasure of talking to you. And I'm hoping that many Gambians like you will come forward with this new Gambia that we're talking about. And what I would suggest to you is, because I don't believe that I should just get up every 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock to go to the office to do something for my country. I don't believe in that. I believe we all can work for our country in different capacities, in different ways. And you're doing it right now, but I think I would encourage you, if you can have radio shows, TV shows, and talk about these things, even in the local languages, it will be very helpful. And I thank you for joining us today on For the Gambia podcast.
I take note.
Please do. Thank you.
Mr. Njie, I've been following you for the past couple of weeks or so, and I've heard you in one of these radio programs talk about us, the diasporans, and you've also written about this in your blog, that we, the diasporans here, we should be the change that we want. You know, we cannot just be sitting over here and being on this online radios talking. And I think the way that you said it was, we are just like the doctors who diagnose the disease, but not the doctors who implement a plan for curing the disease. So what do you think we can do us here, in the diaspora?
It's rather unfortunate that Gambia has a very high population of diasporans spread in all corners of the world, particularly in North America, Western Europe, and parts of Asia. But unfortunately, as a force, this force hasn't really utilized the power that it has. The diasporan community across the world needs to harness the force that they have. I mean, it's a financial force to be reckoned with. It's a brain trust. I mean, if you look at the amount of Gambians living in the diaspora with requisite skills that can come and make a meaningful impact in our country. And they don't have to be in country. They can work together. What needs to happen, and this is my thing, I have seen intelligent, smart, exposed Gambians. And I mean, you go to major multinationals, you go to multilateral organizations, you go to international fora, you will see outstanding, impeccable Gambians. But why can't they collectively come together and form something that can move Gambia for the interest of Gambians, not a sectarian interest, not a community interest, not a personal interest, but the greater good of Gambians? See, I think one thing that has really failed Gambia is our understanding of our civic responsibilities. As much as we have rights as citizens, we have a responsibility to country. And for me, it's called duty, honor to country. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that this diasporan community can do, just listen to our national anthem. It's a prayer. Yep. The national anthem, really, I mean, it's a guiding principle and a guiding light to really put us on track as for what we need to do for our country and to be our brothers and sisters keepers and make sure that we live in harmony towards the common good. We read the national anthem as and when we have time in, when we're in ceremonies or things, but I don't think we take the time to digest and understand what it really means. Just understanding the national anthem will really change our, position in terms of really making Gambia work. So the diasporans, honestly, they have done a lot of work. They have done a lot of good stuff. They have really helped effected change, but the organization of the diasporan communities, as far as I'm concerned, is still very weak. It's not focused. And I think they're gravitating to very dismal issues that are not helping what the greater good should stand for.
Well, talking about the national anthem and what it means, I mean, that's the reason why we play the national anthem at the beginning of our show and towards the end of our show also, just to remind people, what the national anthem means. It's supposed to mean to you as a Gambian. But going back to this diasporan issue, I mean, the argument out there is that, okay, we have the GDF. We raised a few $1,000s, and the remittances that we send home, these are all things that we do. What else do you guys want from us?
It's not what we want from you. We want a systemic organization. I mean, see, the GDF, as far as I'm concerned, lack broad consensus. What is broad consensus? We all gravitate towards it. Whatever we are doing should be devoid of politics. Whatever we are doing should be devoid of sectarian and tribal interests. Let's look at Gambia. Let's set up structures that are looking at Gambia. I don't care whether today we take $20,000 and send it to a village called Jiboro for a village development project. At the end of the day, it's adding socio-economic dividends to a country called Gambia. And this country called Gambia is what I see. I don't see parts of Gambia here and there. So I will want to see a diasporan community that is expanse, is all over in different corners of the diaspora, but they speak with one voice and they have a common agenda, and this common agenda is championed by change agents who can make the meaningful change that we want, and they can also engage government. See, the diaspora, if they are organized, they will be the biggest pressure group that can effect legislation, that can force government in the direction they want to, because they bring in remittance. Diaspora really helps sustain Gambia. A lot of school fees are paid because of the diaspora. A lot of shops are selling cement, tiles, and other things because of the diaspora. A lot of families are being fed because of the diaspora. So once you understand that you, the diaspora, have a critical mass, once you, the diaspora, understand that you're a force to be reckoned with, you need to monetize this influence. And the diaspora is yet to monetize this influence because they haven't mustered a critical mass to champion or support a cause to date. So the diaspora needs to change what they've been doing. What they have been doing for 22 years is to talking at each other instead of talking to the people that matters. For 22 years, I've seen Gambians, yelling insults, screaming, talking, but we haven't constructively come forth with a project that is meaningful for the interest of the greater good. Yes, I applaud the GDF, but to me, that is still a small scale. We need an exponential critical mass to set up an organization or a system that will impact the lives of Gambians and will also be like a police or a watchdog in terms of government and governance issues in the Gambia. They need to know their power. And for the first time, I think now in cabinet, we will have a minister who will be responsible for diaspora affairs. So this is the time for the diaspora to organize. And when I say organize, not on partisan basis, but on national basis, and make sure that they effect change by sponsoring through their ministers cabinet papers that will be discussed at cabinet. What's wrong with having a housing bank that will help diasporans? Because diasporans are sending monies to families to build homes, and they're not happy with the outcome. But if they have contractual obligations with, housing banks and housing trust, these things will be a thing of the past. But it will only happen if the diaspora comes together. We have the people out there, but we have divergent interests that are so minute, they cannot see the bigger picture. They're very myopic. I'm sorry.
We just have a few more questions. Hopefully, you'll be patient enough with us to ask these questions.
All right.
I mean, one of our biggest fights right now with this change is to get that clause in the Constitution that disenfranchises us from voting. Are you in favor of us having that right to be able to vote in national and local elections?
Well, I have a simple problem. And this problem is not that I want to disenfranchise diasporans. Today, if you hold an American passport, it means you've made a pledge of allegiance. Am I right or wrong?
That's true.
Okay, if you made a pledge of allegiance to America, who are you loyal to, the U.S. or the Gambia?
That's a good question.
No, answer me. If you take a pledge as a citizen of the U.S., your allegiance lies where?
With the U.S.
Okay, today, if I make you a minister of, let's say, trade, and you hold an American passport, let's say tomorrow Gambia finds uranium. America wants to negotiate a trade pact with Gambia because they need this uranium for their defense industry. And they come to you, Mr. Seka, what are the quantities of uranium Gambia has? You cannot say, I don't know. The reason why you cannot say, I don't know, you are obliged to defend the interests of the United States.
That's
right
true.
Or wrong?
That is very true.
So this is my fundamental problem. I know these people mean well, but it can be, I'm not saying it is, it can be a conflict of interest down the road. And I don't want to open anything that will create a blurred line that can be open, not for abuse, but to be used by another nation against my country. Therefore, I don't have a problem with who wants to be a Gambian to hold office, but I have a problem with a Gambian with a dual nationality, especially someone who has already pledged his unflinched and unreserved allegiance to another country to serve my country. It can be a national security issue that I don't want to be faced with.
I mean, you make a lot of sense over there. So are you saying that in order for you to serve the Gambia or represent the Gambia in any kind of capacity, you should renounce your citizenship with whatever country you have or not?
Dina ko lakasi olof. Dina ko lakasi olof. Mugina muyomba. Sula Gambia nyore. Fekene Gambia mola nyor. Don't look at what you stand to gain. See where you can take your country. It's called belief. If you believe in Gambia, you will renounce your citizenship in Mars if you have to. If you have to. So dafa am lu olof di oye ngarale. Fi munuñ fe ngarale. You cannot have one here, one there. I don't have a problem with people having dual nationalities. Not at all. Not at all. And mind you, this is not against anyone or blocking people. I am just saying I don't want an issue to arise in the future that we could have averted and said we should have known better. That's just it, as far as I'm concerned.
I totally agree with you on that point. I can't say nothing more.
I mean,
I'm sure when you play this podcast, some people may not like what I say, but I'm saying it from a national security perspective, and the interests of the Gambia supersede any other interest, be it of a person or a nation, to me, Daddy Njie.
That's the beauty
I love Gambia more than any other thing, and to preserve the sanctity and the interest of this country is paramount for me.
That's the beauty of democracy. I mean, as long as people disagree in a constructive way, I don't have a problem with people disagreeing with my views, and I totally respect your views. And I'm quite sure you're very right. Some people will find it even offensive that you're saying that, but that's the beauty of democracy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're coming to the end of this program. I just have here some quick trivia kind of questions that I just want to throw out to you and just pick your brain on it. I mean, if Nyang Njie was to come across $100 million today, what will you do with it?
First and foremost, that'll be nice. I think it can change a lot of lives. But my biggest intervention will be in youth employment, youth empowerment, and also gender issues. I mean, I think Gambia has quite a lot of gender disparities, and I will want to empower the women folk, especially those living in rural communities, because they work too hard and they suffer the brunt of our economic misgivings. So given an opportunity, that's the segment of our society that I really want to help. And I will also at least invest quite a lot in terms of programs for maternal health care to reduce infant mortality rates, and also make sure that our education system is up to date in terms of producing world-class students who can be world-class leaders in any corporate or academic setting globally. So I want Gambia, even the kids that go to school under a mango tree, to be able to sit down at some point with any student at Harvard Business School or the Kennedy School of Government to deliberate on issues and to hold their ground just like any other student from Manhattan or any other student from Simi Valley, California, or any other place in the U.S. That's my aspiration. And if I were to have an unlimited source of funds, those are the interventions that I will want to make.
What is it about life that you value the most?
That's a good one. For me, the thing that I value about life is the dignity of the human being. The dignity of the human being is to allow the human being to express himself or herself unwittingly, unfettered, and allow them to just be who they want to be. I like people to be able to live the lives they want. I am not an intrusionist, and I don't want a government that intrudes into the lives of people. I am a self-professed libertarian, and I believe in civil liberties, and I believe in self-expression at its highest. So I will want to see people live the life they choose and choose to live the life they want.
Down the road, can we expect a book from Nyang Njie?
Oh, definitely. That's a given.
All right.
That's a given. Events are unfolding, and I've been working on something, but I can't say it will be finished anytime soon because I'm yet to see the book through, meaning the idea I have for the book cannot be concluded now because events are still unfolding. So once these events unfold and I still happen to be alive, I'll put a closure to the book.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that. We just want to thank you very much, Mr. Njie, for taking your time talking to us today. We really, really appreciate you doing that. And hopefully your doors will be open if we need you again. So thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure. And it's always nice talking to my compatriots. And one thing, the beauty of Gambia is our diversity, and in our diversity lies our strength. And I think I always tell Gambians this. We should move away from tribal politics. We should focus on issue-oriented politics and stop the politics of personality. See, colonialism has done serious damage into our mindset and our psyche as Gambians. We think very small in terms of groupings, regions, and ethnicities. So now is the time, in terms of building a new Gambia, to see ourselves as one entity, the Gambia. Because if you look at our documents, there's never a place where it says the Muslim or the Christian, the Wolof or the Syrian, the Jago or the Sarahule. It always says the Gambian. So we should start looking forward to the Gambian. And for this to happen, it should start in our schools. Our school system should instill pride in our diversity, yet still muster a resolve to bring us together as an entity called the Gambia. I am proud of the Gambia, and for the Gambia, I will forever remain true. Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to For the Gambia podcast, and our guest today was Nyang Njie, known to many as Nyang Njie, and we're grateful that you honored our invitation. Till we come your way again, myself, Thomas, and my co-host, Pastor Seka, For the Gambia, and For the Gambia ever true. Thank you very much.